A very warm welcome. You're joining us here at Hyde Park on Other Derana 24. Sri Lanka's foreign policy has shaped in such a way that Sri Lanka has passed turbulent times. And today, in today's world context, we're talking about a new world order and how Sri Lanka, with a strategic location, geographically located strategic position, how Sri Lanka can leverage foreign policy for the advantage of the country. My guest tonight is former Foreign Secretary to Sri Lanka, Ambassador Prasad Kariyawasam, a career diplomat who has served at the highest level of the country's foreign policy machinery. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Indeewari.
I believe
happy to be back.
Yes, happy to have you once again. These are uncertain times, rapidly changing times. At the same time, Sri Lanka has, as I said before, has had turbulent times in our past, from a conflict, post-conflict, to a period of even shutdown during COVID, and then the economic crisis, to the most recent natural calamities too, where you have to work with the rest of the world. In today's context, how would you observe Sri Lanka's foreign policy approach?
I think Sri Lanka's current foreign policy or foreign policy approach, I would put it, is fine. For instance, I heard the President in his National Day speech, he said something which I thought was very good. He says international relations is of a new dimension. The objective, he said, was to strengthen national security, improve citizens' lives, and build recognition for Sri Lanka. Those three words contain a lot of things, which means it is devoid of any particular ideology. It is devoid of anything that can be seen as driven by a particular political interest, but this means it is purely national interest. National interest of the country must drive our foreign policy. National interest means what people expect economically, socially, and aspirationally. Public expectations from the country. Now, country's foreign policy must be devised and evolved as a dynamic policy to achieve those ends. And that policy does not need to have any labels of we are non-aligned, we are neutral, we are balancing. Those words do not count. What matters is how we try to create a web of international relations with key countries, key economies, and how do we manage that in a world that is changing by the day. And today's world is changing very fast. There's strategic flux in the world, and people know that changes. We can talk about that. But to handle that change and where we should be looking for opportunities for Sri Lanka to leverage those changes to achieve what our people are expecting from the government in terms of their economic well-being, political aspirations, and security. So I was very impressed by those few words that President spoke yesterday. So he gives a very big umbrella under which there can be many policies, many ideas that will suit Sri Lanka to have relationships with nations in the world and institutions in the world for our benefit and for mutual benefit.
You mentioned that Sri Lanka should not have labels for our foreign policy, whether it's non-aligned or aligned, or but do you think over the years Sri Lanka has been reactive in the form of our foreign policy?
No, we were sometimes taking the lead. Now, for instance, we were major members of the non-aligned movement. We were founding fathers of the non-aligned movement. But that's a movement that took place during a Cold War between two major superpowers. Today's world is different. Today's world, you have one superpower, military superpower, whereas it's a multipolar. There are multipolar world in terms of economy. Economically multipolar world with one military superpower. So it's a very, very different world we are today. So if we are not a military power, so therefore I don't think Sri Lanka should be careful not to get involved in military issues, except for our own national security, which can be secured with right partnership with right countries. And bearing in mind, we are a democracy, and we are the oldest democracy in Asia. So for that, one set of relationships. Then for our economic well-being, in a multipolar world economy, how do we fashion our relationships? Who are our key partners? With whom? What are the engagements we need to have? What are the engagements we need to promote? For instance, if you take India, India is a key partner for Sri Lanka for all aspects. But for economy also, India is very important for Sri Lanka. Now, these are the things that we should be focusing and trying to understand. Now, for instance, if you want me to talk about India-Sri Lanka relationship in terms of both these aspects, I can, but that's what I'm being.
As we move forward, we would certainly want to talk about India-Sri Lanka relations, especially with your experience working in India, in New Delhi, as ambassador to Sri Lanka. But as Foreign Secretary, I would also want to go back to your period as Foreign Secretary, where key decisions have been taken. But going forward, the reason why I asked you whether our foreign policy has been more reactive, my question once again, whether we have, our approach has been reactive diplomacy, especially because we saw India-China questions about alliances with the two major powers and the United States. How we're going to work with the rest of our allies, like Japan, who has been a long-term development partner of Sri Lanka. So have we been more reactive in the sense to controversies or questions that arose from a foreign policy, external affairs perspective?
There have been times we have been only reactive, that I agree, but I don't want to go into details of, but we have, but sometimes when the world is very orderly and very predictable, like it was in certain period in post-Second World War history, then being reactive does not damage or does not, it's not too negative. But in a world which is very volatile, very unpredictable as to how things move, both economically and politically and militarily, like the current situation, then being reactive is negative, because you will miss out opportunities. So we need to, in a world that is turbulent, you have to be very proactive, and unless you are proactive, you are going to miss it. Other side will gain that benefit. So proactive foreign policy is essential when things are volatile.
You speak about proactive foreign policy in turbulent times. Does this mean Sri Lanka should now have a comprehensive foreign policy approach where we have a documented foreign policy approach here?
I am one of those who think we don't need to have the documented long list of ideas as to what we should do, except very broad idea like President presented. Because foreign policy is a dynamic thing, it's not static. We cannot stay in the days of 70s when the world was divided by two powerful blocs. So anything that has happened in that past is still relevant, but that is not the basis on which we can run our relationships now. We have seen China's rise. We have seen US now taking a very different approach to the world. They have, the US is kind of withdrawing into a different approach into the whole foreign affairs, foreign relationships they have. And they are focusing more on Western Hemisphere. About 10 years back, President Obama had the pivot to Asia. Now it is pivot to Western Hemisphere by US. And there is also using economic leverage to achieve foreign policy goals by President Trump is also very apparent. So it's a very different world. So therefore, I would think documenting something substantively at a time when things are changing very fast may not be the best idea. But we should have a broad idea, so the broad principles on which we, Sri Lanka, will establish contact with other nations can be there. And I think that's why I mentioned the broad principles President in few words articulated on the National Day speech is excellent. And within that we can build. But if we are, foreign policy is not an academic exercise. Foreign policy is a practical pursuit. Practical pursuit to leverage situations for our benefit, both in the short term, medium term, and long term. Long term ones are where we engage in trade partnerships. We should now, for instance, with India, we had the first FTA for Sri Lanka with India was signed in 2000. We haven't gone further than that. There was SEPA, which was almost negotiated but did not take off the ground. That was in 2008 or something. Then now we are negotiating ETCA, Economic and Technical Cooperation Partnership with India. But we are not done much. We need to go forward on these things because it will also impact our economy. It will also consolidate our place in South Asia. So these are things we should do long term. So since you ask for policy, a policy should be establishing various economic linkages with the region and the powerful economic players. So something like that, I agree. But detailing that, giving a label to our policy as we are non-aligned, because don't forget, some non-aligned countries have military bases in non-aligned countries in the Middle East. They are non-aligned. They are part of the armed movement, but they have military bases. Now we should not be having military bases in this country. So therefore, we using these labels is not a good idea.
You mentioned leveraging opportunities for our benefit. You've highlighted previously too the importance of a broader international network for the benefit of Sri Lanka, national interest of Sri Lanka. In light of emerging global challenges that we've spoken of, that we hear of, what should be the top priorities for Sri Lanka, if you say, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Very important question. That is what we should be having in a policy document. What are our priorities? That should come so that people who practice diplomacy, who is reading about Sri Lanka, will know what are our priorities. So those priorities should come from what is our national ethos, national social and economic aspirations of people. So I would think one very important thing is we need to have our economy moving fast. So we need to identify countries and areas where we can engage and create economic partnerships that will benefit Sri Lanka. But of course, it's always mutually beneficial. Those are very important aspects. We can't wait for that, because if we wait, somebody else will pick that. So we need to focus on economic partnerships with countries that will ultimately take our economy into another level. That's number one, economy. Then of course, security. Security of our country, we have been once beaten by separatist struggles and internal struggles. We should ensure that, like President has said many times, something of that sort will never happen here. Now for that, what kind of relationship we need to build with countries with whom? Now we have some in the region, we have some outside the region, we have those who are using the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean is a very active ocean, both economically and militarily. Navy's Indian Ocean it's a very active ocean. So we are right in the middle of the ocean. So we need to build partnerships with countries that use and leverage Indian Ocean so that we are also on the table. When it comes to Indian Ocean matters, Sri Lanka should be always on the table. If you're not on the table, you're on the menu. We can't be on the menu, right? If you're on the table, you can't be on the menu. So we should seek to be on the table when it comes to Indian Ocean matters. Indian Ocean, what counts to us? And anything that is South Asia. Now that's why I'm very happy to hear that President Andrew Kumara is going to India, I think next week, for the AI Impact Summit, where there will be about 10 head of states and head of governments, plus now quite a number of ministers. So it's good that President has been invited. Now he is going. So this is convened by India, and this is a very important subject. I think France, Brazil, so many important countries are coming. So we are on the table in South Asia. And if then you will be able to create links, partnerships that will benefit us in time to come. There may not be immediate benefit, but that signals to the rest of the world, India is partnering with Sri Lanka and with many countries on this subject, and we are going to be a force to reckon with in time to come. At this point, AI for Sri Lanka may be very peripheral, but it's not going to be peripheral in time to come, because we are right in the Indian Ocean where cables run, undersea cables. So things like that are what matters to us. So that's a priority. So to be on the table when it comes to South Asia and Indian Ocean. Always we should seek a place and be then active. It can some other results come long term. Then of course we need to be mindful of social aspiration of our people. That is the primacy of democracy, how we promote and link up with other democracies in the world, because there will be always certain level of comfort and sympathy among democracies like India and Sri Lanka today. I think the best democracies in South Asia. I hope other countries won't get offended by my comment, but at least it has been the practice, continuous democracies. So we benefit from each other by that, and we consolidate democracy. And democracy is the best mode of government, to my mind, out of all other situations. So things like that, those are the priorities that I can see which can be expanded. For this, we have to have very active engagement and active policies that will enable Sri Lanka to be there, and then we must marshal our diplomatic forces, that means foreign ministry officials, everybody, to look for opportunities where Sri Lanka has that leverage, create the leverage.
I'd like to speak about the Foreign Service as well as we move forward to a new age, new era. But you mentioned about trying not to be on the menu. What should we avoid here? As a small but strategic state, at times we look at ourselves as a small state, but forget about the strategic location, strategic importance. At the same time, one might question whether Sri Lanka overestimated our strategic position not to work with the rest of the world. So while we balance this aspect, how do we ensure that we don't fall prey to these strategic powers who are interested in the location and our importance?
Good question. Now, one thing I agree with you about that over importance is this location. Yes, we are important, but it is not as important as the 18th or 19th century, or even early 20th century. Up to 21st century or up to late 20th century, mode of transport, mode of conveyance of goods were mostly sea-based. Air transport was not there. There was no intercontinental ballistic missiles. So even to fight a war, you need a ship. So in a world like that, Sri Lanka's Trincomalee port, Colombo port, all that, so very, very important for both strategic and economic purposes. And strategic, I mean here military. purposes. So that importance has receded today. So if we think that Trincomalee is as important as 19th and 20th century, that's not true. Trincomalee is now very important as an economy. It can be developed as an important economic hub. While its naval capacity is still there, it is more of an excellent economic hub. Because in a world where you have aircraft carriers, it's like warring cities. Like aircraft carrier is a big thing. I have been to one of them. It's like you don't need anybody you have, and then so the importance of a port is only as a supply base, not for a fighting base. So it's a different world. In that world, we must understand what is our importance. Our importance is mostly to secure the ongoing economic activity without disruption. A peaceful Indian Ocean is not only in our interest, but in the interest of great powers. Because if there's disturbance, that disturbance can affect everybody. So we have to be mindful in that and then create background and connections to avoid conflict, but to promote economic activity across for supply chain reliability, avoiding its vulnerability, things like that, and to ensure cable networks, health. Those are more important than thinking that we are part of an international war machine. We are not no more that important, like the days that Japanese bombed Sri Lanka.
Ambassador Kariyawasam, you mentioned keywords in the interest of other foreign powers as well. So here, when we work with the rest of the world, with key powers who have significant influence in our part of the world, how do we avoid infringing India's security concerns?
Yes. Now, we are in Indian Ocean, and India is just next to us, have been there. So India's security is a very important aspect of Sri Lanka, because if India is disturbed, it will impact Sri Lanka as much as India, if not more. Imagine our Colombo port, which is 70% of its business to Indian transshipment, suddenly due to some upheaval in India, things don't move, we will be in bigger trouble than India, in fact. So we should first be mindful that if India is in trouble, we will be in trouble. If we are in trouble, India will also face trouble. Now, that's when we were in economic difficulty, India was first responder. Why? Because it's in their interest to keep Sri Lanka prosperous, because that will benefit India. Indians are the biggest investors, biggest tourist generating country. We have a lot of things in common, and if there is a upheaval in Sri Lanka, there could be refugee outflow to India, like it happened about 20 years ago. So it's a mutual interest for Sri Lanka and India to keep Indian Ocean security in a peaceful manner. So we should work with India for that purpose, and Indian security is as important for us as much as India. It does not mean that we should be only thinking of working on security matters only with India. No, I'm not saying that. But there could be certain red lines that India has in terms of certain aspects of the Indian Ocean. We should try to observe that, because that's in our interest. That is in our interest for our own economic well-being and on our own security. There is this idea that India is a net security provider for the region, which is not a bad idea, which is good.
India recently, through its budget, also had a significant allocation for Sri Lanka. And on the other hand, we see the question of solving the fishermen issue, a long-standing economic question for the northern part of Sri Lanka and southern India. So in approaching these sensitive questions which impact the people of our nations, how do you think diplomacy should play a key role here?
Park Bay fishermen issue has been there for as long as I can remember. Now, some fisheries industry people in South India and Tamil Nadu claim that this is because we had this Kachathil agreement and when we demarcated our international maritime boundary line. That is not true at all. That was a very good decision taken by both governments in 1976 or somewhere. So we have our borders are not disputed, it's a clean border. Fisheries issue happened something like this. Before the mechanized fishing system was introduced to Tamil Nadu, I'm not going to mention the country that introduced that. When Tamil Nadu fishermen started using mechanized fishing, which means bottom trawling, then the problem started. Before that, there was enough fish for fishermen of both countries to fish. This industrial scale fishing in Park Bay is not sustainable because there is not enough resources there for industrial scale fishing. So because of that, Indian industrial level scale fishermen keep coming across Sri Lankan waters. And sometimes our fishermen also go like that to some other northern Indian waters and several places. But Park Bay is basically a question of result of industrial scale fishing, mostly by the Indian fishermen who engage in very harmful practices of fishing methods. I think the solution, which is difficult to arrive because of certain forces in Tamil Nadu who maintain profitable business, they have a very thriving export business even to China. But unless we stop industrial scale fishing and say Park Bay is an economic, environmentally sensitive zone, only traditional fishing is allowed, then this problem will go away. So but will that happen? That's a big question.
That would be a big political
yes, decision. It's a very, very, very big decision for India to make, Sri Lanka also to make. So, but only solution is to stop mechanized fishing in that eco-sensitive marine area.
But very quickly, where do you think this solution should begin? Of course, it's, as we said, India has a big political decision to take, and for Sri Lanka too. But this is a question of livelihoods, about a political sensitive question.
It is question of livelihood on both sides. So for Indian Tamil Nadu fishermen also, it's a question of livelihoods. So so how will we handle that? How will India handle it? How will we handle it? Our fishermen also seeking that, so it's a challenging situation. We only have patchwork solutions, and when things become unbearable, we catch few fishermen from India and then release them out of that. They come again, and solution is that, but get there.
At least in the interest of the environment,
yes,
and the mass erosion of natural resources.
Otherwise, one day there won't be enough fish in that region. It will die. Park Bay was a very rich, excellent fishing ground, where there was enough fish for both country fishermen to fish. About 30 years ago, there was no problem. There was enough fish, but they use only traditional fishing method, no industrial scale fishing.
In that case, that it will be a major environmental concern as well.
Yes, it is still. It is very much. It's a sensitive environmental area, but not much focus on that because livelihood issues of both sides. And governments, both our democracies, have to listen to people.
Certainly. I'd like to move forward to the US. with the US recently reducing reciprocal tariffs on Sri Lankan exports to 20% from the initial high rates that all feared would impact our industry, we still have much to work on. This is a huge impact on Sri Lanka. Neighboring India has secured 18%, but key sectors like apparel, tea, and these sectors will continue to see major challenges and impact jobs. We've been talking about livelihoods, and then it impacts foreign earnings. So what is the sustainable solution here? As a former ambassador and your experience working in the US as permanent representative as well, what diplomatic strategies do you think are left here for Sri Lanka to work with the Trump administration particularly?
Yes, it is. You have the answer, but actually we have to keep working because the fact that India got 18% and we are at 20 means we are at a major disadvantage. So it is a situation where we cannot sit still. We have to be moving. We have to be looking at, like India did. Actually, India had to negotiate with US and agree on something that sounds very good for India. And for that, I think there were several give and takes in that process, which is some of it maybe not be available in public terms, but both we should be happy in that sense that India and US has come to kind of understanding. But that understanding has a reflection on us, because most stuff in Sri Lanka would have expected that to be on par with ours, but it is lower than ours. So we have a lot of work to do.
So what trade-offs do you think Sri Lanka can offer?
Of course, I'm not an expert on trade negotiations. These are things that I really don't know, but experts must get into. And then it not only trade items, but there could be other measures that Sri Lanka could take to convince Trump administration to have a better rate for Sri Lanka. So that includes many things, not only trade matters. It includes how we approach certain issues in the world. So it's a multi-pronged approach like India did. For instance, India, I think, is changing its pattern of purchasing oil from Russia and Iran. Reportedly, that's so. I'm not saying we are in that league, but there are certain measures that Sri Lanka will be required to take in terms of progressing and getting a better deal.
Right, I think it's time to take a short break here at Hyde Park. We're in conversation with Sri Lanka's former Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Prasad Kariyawasam. We're examining how Sri Lanka can work with the rest of the world in these turbulent yet uncertain and changing world order. We'll be right back after this short break. To stay with us. Welcome back. We are in conversation with former Foreign Secretary Mr. Prasad Kariyawasam, who's talking about Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka's strategic location and how Sri Lanka can work with the rest of the world, leverage Sri Lanka's opportunities in advantage of the countries and to spur economic activity here. As we speak about economic activity, FDIs, we cannot just not talk about it, although times are different now. Sri Lanka still requires a massive inflow of foreign direct investment, surpassing targets we have set before. But somehow, post-economic crisis, we've not succeeded in working with the rest of the world. All those signals of debt restructuring and putting our economy back on track have been sent to the rest of the world. Many argue that we have to first work on these investment bottlenecks to cut down on red tape. But what's the missing link here?
Yeah, those things are important. As you said about how easy you can get engaged in Sri Lankan economy with less bureaucratic hurdles. But then let's understand how investors of some countries start investing in the long term. Mm-hmm. The most important for them is rule of law and and the predictability of the governance and regulatory mechanisms in the long term. Now, because we are a democracy and because we have been going through some turbulent times politically, there has not been much of a consistency in that. So I think very important that we create regulatory and rule of law mechanisms that involves investors in a manner that is predictable in the long term. Now, for that, I think both government and opposition must genuinely work together, like they have worked now in terms of our relationship with India. With relationship with India, I can see there is a bipartisan or multi-party consensus that it's important to have our relationship with India as the #1 priority in our foreign affairs. So similarly, I think there must be a multi-party consensus to create a regulatory regime with regard to foreign investments that will be long-term, that will be very predictable, and our economy is connected to that. So that is how I think the government and even the opposition, because that is what matters most, because and very clean environment without corruption. It is Sri Lanka, a lot of countries allege Sri Lanka politicians and bureaucrats for graft. Right? Now, this government came into power to eliminate that, which they are on. Now, how can we ensure that none of that, something like that will never return to our midst? That is important, because then only investors will feel confident that what they are investing is for profit. It's not investing is not for as a generous agreement. So we need to create that, and that is something that I think all parties must work together, as important as reconciliation efforts with our own communities, which is a very important thing in that same scheme of things, because there are enough expatriates in Sri Lanka, enough wealthy expatriates who can also come back and invest here. So we must ensure the public locally and the world, conflict periods in Sri Lanka is gone forever. And President was right in his, I think one of his statements he made, reconciliation and is one of the priorities. We want to settle this in a manner that violence will never return to our land. If there is some assurance like that, that we have both regulatory mechanisms and non-violence and settling down our community participation and community confidence in the country, if it is kind of a long term, if there's a feeling like that, that will permeate to the outer world, there will be definitely more investment in this country. So we have to work locally first, so that we create. Sometimes some parties think for the short-term interest, creating some conflict will be good to attain power, but it's a very short-term view. It hits at everybody in the long term. Nothing will move unless we create a peaceful nation like Singapore did. Singapore did not do much. They just created elimination of communal violence. That's what they did. Singapore had a lot of communal violence. They eliminated that from the system. And public, the international community felt it is gone forever. Malaysia did the same thing. Malaysia had eliminated, and confidence to, and then regulatory mechanisms, everything long term. And now Vietnam has done that, long term. Indonesia is doing it.
Is it a long way from where we are?
Now that's even we would know where we are. That's a local question, right? So we have to work for that. And that is not only the government responsibility, it's a public responsibility. Public also must respond to it and not fall into situations where we create tension among our communities, and go for genuine reconciliation, and to have bipartisan consensus on rule of law matters and eliminating corruption. If international community sees Sri Lanka as a place where their money is safe long term, they will come because there's talent, there's ability, and what is missing is only those few parts.
Interesting how that would be long-term political stability also for Sri Lanka. I want to move on to talk about China here. We spoke about India, we spoke about negotiations with the US, but as we look to balance this balancing act of the great powers, China and India, there have been questions about whether Sri Lanka was leaning more towards China or whether Sri Lanka was disadvantaged as a result of agreements with China. Looking back, I want to just talk about whether we have made any errors in working with these great powers, or how we can work with China in such a way that Sri Lanka can derive more economic benefits rather than fall into that debt trap that internationally is spoken about.
China is a very important partner for Sri Lanka, both politically and economically. There's no question about that. China has been closely connected to Sri Lanka for long years. Now, but on the other hand, we must understand what are our interests and what are Chinese interests. It is, and we should understand, it is not coterminous, because China is not part of South Asia. But China is a big nation. Now it's getting bigger. That's the number 2 economy and almost number 2 military power. So their interests and our interests are not exactly the same. So we should understand that. And when we working with China, but on the other hand, China's economic capacity and ability to invest, ability to engage, and for us to benefit from that, their economic capacity is immense. We have done some areas very well, and people can allege that it's debt trap investment, debt trap diplomacy, but one can also see differently that we want to develop our infrastructure in a manner that we could, and that we should now, therefore, once we have done that, so we had to use what we have to our benefit as much as possible. For instance, we have now Hambantota. Hambantota port is now run by China in the long term, but it is now becoming day by day a vibrant place, and therefore we can use that port for further engagement economically with the rest of the world as well, and with China primarily. So we have to work like that. And then, of course, how to develop trading arrangement with China that we can also benefit to some extent, which is not easy.
Do you think we have managed these relations with India, also with China, with much sophistication, especially when we talk about diplomacy here?
Well, there may have been instances where we could have done better, but in general, we have managed it well. We have managed things well. We have not let Sri Lanka be a battleground for between India and China. I don't think like that. I don't see like that. But there may be certain things we would have done differently, and it would have been perhaps better for Sri Lanka. But I don't want to name those things because that is invidious. But in general, Sri Lanka has not done too bad, because we need both economic might of both these two countries, who are the largest players in Asia, to be with us, to work with us. And they are all good for us. But it is not a zero-sum game for Sri Lanka with regard to India and China. We have to have a mutually exclusive, very close relationship with India, and similarly with mutually exclusive good relationship with China for our economic well-being. And so that's how we should be looking at. We should not be looking at that relationship as a zero-sum game.
You are a career diplomat, so I want to talk about Sri Lanka's foreign service institutions within the Foreign Service as well. Do you think our Foreign Service is geared to face the challenges ahead and also to work in the interest and to derive the best of the opportunities that lie ahead, whether we talk about AI, whether we talk about trade negotiations? And what are the urgent reforms that are required if we are to take the Foreign Service on par with the rest of the world? We see India, how they're working largely with the rest of the world, young diplomats. So I think our young diplomats also would want to hear from you what's urgently necessary to shape Sri Lanka's forward journey.
Yeah, it's a tough question because I don't want to embarrass anyone. But let me put it in simple terms. They have a challenge because we are living in an interconnected world. I remember when I joined the Foreign Service 1981 or 81, we were taken to Mr. Arthur C. Clarke, 10 of us for a briefing. He was leaving, and then his first words to us was, "Aren't you fellows obsolete?" So our heart sank because his point was that the emerging technology communications will make diplomats a different task because public and the rulers will know everything what happened through, let's say, media, now social media. And so diplomats today face a big challenge. Both electronic and published media is very vibrant. Before diplomats can report something to Sri Lanka, it's already broadcasted by the public. Therefore, in that challenging environment, diplomats must be retrained and trained to skill themselves as to how to work in a modern environment. With some of them have that. There's a lot of capacity, capacity within the foreign ministry. But they must be given the opportunity. They must be given assignments. They must be assigned and given the task. Now you perform, and then create a good support system in the foreign ministry. I think it is happening, but there can be much more done, and select and give opportunities in key places of the world. Send the career officer with targets, with good support from capital, and it should be done in a manner strategically placing good officers in strategic places so that they can produce the results that we expect and support them locally. But there's talent there's enough talent at the current Foreign Service officers.
I don't have much time, but I thought I will focus on migrant workers here, especially female workers. During your UN work, you highlighted how domestic workers, mostly women, are often left out of surveys and protections and face border issues, broad issues like racial discrimination in migration. And we have seen this throughout these years, how Sri Lankan migrant workers, female migrant workers, have faced much discrimination. But in the economic interest, this has continued. We've spoken about shifting to skilled migration, but I don't know how successful we have been. But the question is, with a big share of those leaving Sri Lanka now, what targeted policies do you think we have to employ and adopt to better empower and protect, especially these female workers?
Yeah, migrant workers, when it comes to migrant workers, both female and male, I think there should be better focus on their well-being. By successive governments have tried, but then it has been done in a manner that it's not a kind of a long-term project. It is kind of just one project. Most important thing is that we must understand female workers are the most vulnerable group, and there should be special arrangements in countries where they work with specialized officers to support them. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen. So there should be a framework must be created, regulatory framework again, that it will stay permanent and they have a place of access easily. And today with electronic electronic capacity, can be easily done. So we must start using social media platforms and electronic ways, means to support these groups, using that as a mode of conveyance. Because if you take, let's say, Saudi Arabia, some of them will be working in faraway places. So only way to contact them is have a kind of electronic connections. So we are not, I think at the moment, we are not yet using enough the electronic capacity available in the world to help these people. But I want to make this opportunity to say that Sri Lanka migrant workers, both Sri Lankans abroad and migrant workers from other countries working in Sri Lanka, also now a fact. Increasingly, Sri Lanka will need more migrant workers from the region if our economy takes off. So in a situation like that, we should now, it's time for us to start discussing what are the conditions we create for the migrant workers from other countries working in Sri Lanka. Are we going to have a system like green card, like work permits? Because we will need them. If our economy is going to take off, we don't have enough people working. Already there are people who are working in the black. They should be regularized. So migrant workers, both Sri Lankans and those from other countries who are working here, must be regularized, connected electronically to the grid of the ministry or agency that is working on their welfare. So these are things we should do and we can do. And in that context, I want to congratulate the government. I heard an announcement saying that government is planning to introduce voting for migrant workers. Very important, because that voting, that capacity will give them a voice in the parliament, and they will, so it's a very good initiative to give voting rights for migrant workers, but it should be done in a manner that will become credible. So I want to congratulate government on that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kariyawasam, for your time here once again at Hyde Park, shedding light into what's happening across the world and how Sri Lanka can make use of Sri Lanka's strategic location to our advantage.
Thank you. Nice to see you again, Indeewari, and wish you all the best. And I also wish all the best for Sri Lanka to leverage itself in this new emerging world to get the benefit for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Former Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Ambassador Kariyawasam, joined the Sri Lanka Foreign Service in 1981. A career diplomat, was Sri Lanka's top diplomat in 2017 onwards, and has worked in key postings such as in New Delhi, for several postings in the US, worked as a permanent representative to the UN, has worked in Geneva and a number of international organizations, including the International Organization for Migration. Thank you very much for joining us here at Hyde Park on Other Derana. We'll see you again next week with yet another discussion here. Enjoy the rest of the lineup of programs. Have a pleasant evening.